What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and this is part 5 of my deep dive into the Moody Blues studio album discography for the first time in my life. Recently discovered that they were the top 25 British rock band of all time, according to a list, and the top 25 prog rock time of all time, according to a list. And it was the only band on either list that I was highly unfamiliar with. I knew 3 songs, so I decided to go through all the albums and see what this band is about. And this is number 5, To Our Children's Children, released in November of 1969. I'm going to talk about my experience with this, listening to it a lot of times in the last couple of days, because I'm really like this album. And then I will rank this to the other 4 that I've done thus far. And then continue to do that through the whole discography. But yeah, I really like this album. It's interesting that they're a top 25 prog band, because I've said this, I think, in all the videos. To me, they're more of a psych band, kind of a psych pop rock, very hippie, very drug saturated. Like, I know a lot of people in college that were into the Moody Blues. If I'd ever heard of them, it was probably at a party at some point, I'm sure. But never paid attention to them for whatever reason. But I see the attraction, and I really almost feel like I'm back in my college years, like indulging in this band and really having a good time. As someone pointed out in the previous video, a comment in the previous video, there is something very dated about this band, in the sense that they definitely sound of the 60s, of like this sort of hippie psych movement. And that's okay, because I think now, when we've cycled through so many other genres, it kind of still works. At least it works for me. But then I'm a self-identified hippie, so no surprise there. I do think this is a concept album. It starts off with a song called Higher and Higher, and it sounds like it's like a rocket ship taking off, where the very first note is like this, and then we just get this like sort of ascending, noisy, drony, angelic choir kind of in the background, soaring sound that sounds like maybe we're going into space. This did come out 3 months after mankind went to space, or at least landed on the moon. At least we'd already been in space. But it definitely seems like there's some sort of inspiration there and some connection to that. I can't believe it's just random. But the opening track, Higher and Higher, might be my favorite opening track of all of them so far. Because once we like reach space, I'm assuming, this sort of really awesome, loose, jammy psych rock song emerges out of this. And then we get narration, as we have on the past 4 albums. This one being the 4th, 2, 3, 4, and then this one 5. So past 3 albums. But it's the best narration so far. It does this neat sort of tonal shift immediately, like they're still trying to find out the way it should sound as they're doing it, and then they settle upon something. But it has this really urgent, like, race car, like, he's coming around the corner, we're about to hit space, oh my gosh, this is beautiful for mankind. This really neat urgency about it that makes it work. Awesome opener. My only complaint is it's too short, and it kind of fades out at the end. They could have written this for much longer. And it is one of the longest songs on the album, but still too short. My only real issue with this album is the second song, because as Higher and Higher fades out, the next song, Eyes of a Child Part 1, fades in like volume increments, and it just, the energy that the opening song creates is sort of lost. That momentum is lost. But then, as I'm rethinking this in real time, maybe the Higher and Higher is we've reached space, and the opening of this is like we're now experiencing like weightlessness for the first time, and we're actually in awe of space. So it is this sort of like silence, and we're seeing everything now through the eyes of a child. It all makes sense. It's a really kind of soft acoustic song. It kind of slowly gets louder. It's like psych folk. And I don't like the phrase eyes of a child. I don't like anything of a child. I don't know. Seems a little something. But it's, kind of a nice soft acoustic song. Needed maybe a little more punch to it. But if there is a weak spot, this is it. And for me, it's the only one that's it. The next song, Floating, comes in with this awesome, really nice psych pop that's driven by the bass. Like the first note I have on this is bass with like 4 exclamation points. The bass on this album is spectacular throughout. Melodic and driving and just always kind of doing things that are not expected. Bass is fantastic. But Floating is a really nice sort of psych pop song. At times reminds me of like a Mamas and the Papas, but just with a lot more psych energy, just like drenched in its very core. And then we go into Eyes of a Child 2, which is a much bigger sort of pop rock song. It still emerges out of some quiet, but this one's too short. I mean, this is some really good energy, kind of tapping into the higher and higher energy. Not as jammy, not as loose, not as sort of just driving, but still some really, really good energy. We get this short little 1-minute acoustic number called I Never Thought I'd Live to Be 100, which just works perfectly, just perfect little length of a song. And then that goes into Beyond, which is fantastic. This awesome instrumental groove that just kind of drops out of the previous song. Almost sounds like it could be like a can jam, just like excised out of the middle of a jam. It's got this really nice driving energy. At times reminds me of like a Flaming Lips jam circa, I don't know, like their 2010 period, circa The Terror, or maybe Mystics, or maybe Embryonic, but sounds like a Flaming Lips jam circa that era. Really awesome psych energy, maybe not as dark as that. But after like 50 seconds, the awesomeness just fades away. And we go into this like ominous, slow, droning vibe for about 30 seconds. And then it comes back. And then it fades away again. And then it comes back. It is a crazy ride. And the first time I listened to it, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, okay, the first 50 seconds of this are like the best thing I think I've heard them do so far. And all of a sudden it fades out. It was like, oh, well, that's a bummer. But then when it came back, I was like, well, that's kind of weird. It kind of doesn't work. It's a little disjointed. But then the more I listen to this album, the more I'm like, to me, this is the highlight. This weird in and out experience is fantastic. Interestingly enough, the next song is called Out and In. And it almost seems like the two should be reversed, because this is a very like, oh, we're in, and then we're out, and then we're in, and then we're out type song. But yeah, this might be my favorite song. This is definitely the favorite song on this album. One of the favorite things I've heard. During some of the soft sections, there's some nice airy, fluty vibes, little progginess seeps in there. But it's a weird song. And it's just fun, and it feels experimental, and it feels like the band is just kind of doing whatever it wants to do. And that goes into Out and In, which is sort of like a mid-tempo Pink Floyd-y type, acoustic-y type, pre-Dark Side metal, Obscured by Clouds era type thing. Just layers of just psych energy. Just so much stuff is going on psych-wise. It's just this awesome, just dense cloud of psychness. But just nice melodies, nice vocals, just this really awesome mid-tempo psych song that's just fantastic. And that closes out side A. Side B opens up with another great psych pop song called the G word for Romani people. They don't want to be called this. I don't think the Moody Blues mean anything. They're not being derogatory, but it's a word that's now a slur, so we're not going to say it. But everybody uses it. Deep Purple uses it. Jimi Hendrix uses it. They use it here. There's a band called the Something Kings who play music by it. But it's G of a Strange and Distant Time. Really good song. Nice synths in here. Great vocals in here. I think I'm starting to appreciate. This is the one where they have a lot of really great vocal moments throughout all these albums, but I think the vocals on this are just a little more celestial, maybe a little more next level, a little more out there. Not crazy weird out there, but just soaring beautiful out there. Nice little rock section in this song. And again, I don't think the Moody Blues weren't slurring anybody. You know, this is a recent change in this word. So, but yeah, really, really good song. Number 2, we get Eternity Road, which is kind of a calmer, slower, trippy psych pop song. Fantastic bass, really nice kind of snaky guitar lines weaving throughout the thing. I think we get a pretty intense solo in the second half. And then there's a bass line in this song, Eternity Road, that reminds me of it's a Jethro Tull bass line. At times I thought it was Beret, but I don't think it's Beret. I think it might be there's a Living in the Past maybe, but the bass line of this reminds me of a Jethro Tull bass line. And also maybe because of that tends to feel maybe just a little more proggy, so maybe a little more proggy. But a really cool song, really nice guitar action, nice short little solo, some really good stuff. Candle of Life is kind of a softer ballady number, but has a very 70s vibe, almost like they were now aware that maybe soft rock was going to emerge in the 70s, like bands like Bread, but they just wanted to give it a little more muscle and psych it up a little bit. But it's a pretty good little song. Great bass playing. Sun is Still Shining has this awesome, I'm pretty sure it's a cello, but this sort of string action that seems to kind of be working against the song and creates this nice little psych tension in there. Reminds me of, I think it's a Dukes of Stratosphere song that leans heavy on like cello usage, or at least like string usage, but it's a really cool psych vibe. Great song. I Never Thought I'd Live to Be a Million. The first one was I Never Thought I'd Be 100. This is I Never Thought I'd Be a Million. Like pretty much, I think it's pretty much the same song, but it's different lyrics and it's half the length, short little acoustic ballad. And then the last song, Watching and Waiting, leans much more into the prog ballad energy. I think there's a lot of mellotron on this. And so there's just that sort of, that sea of like, of prog keyboard synthiness that just kind of floats there and drives the song. But it's a nice, slow, dreamy, floating ballad, watching and waiting. Maybe we're up in space and we're watching and waiting to come back down. I don't know. It all feels very floaty and spacey, at times trippy, at times reminiscent of like, I think I referenced 2001 Space Odyssey for the last album, but like the scene at the end, the last part, when David Bowman is becoming the Starman and goes through those weird lights, like the Beyond is almost like that weird light section. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this album. I think it is the most consistent album they've done. Almost every album so far has been like, other than the first one, which was kind of spotty throughout it, but pretty consistent. I either thought it was a great first half or a great second half, and the two have not yet met. I think this is by far the most consistent from start to finish. I didn't know any of the songs. I don't think many of the songs are, like there's no Tomorrow, Tuesday Afternoon as epic as that. Or is it, what are some of the other songs? That Never Something song from the previous one, I just wrote the first name down. Or like, Ride My Seesaw. There's no real hits, but this is a slow burn-in just work of like, this is a good 1969 psych hippie album, man. I really, really enjoyed this. Anyways, where would I rank this if I had to compare it to the other ones? I have it at number 1. Yeah, I mean, it can't be below Days of Future Past, because as intrigued as I still am with that album, and as incredible as I think the second half of that album is, the first half is still something I kind of struggle with. And this, I don't really struggle with anything other than the phrase eyes of a child. So yeah, that's how I would rank them. All right, let me know what you think of this album. Let me know what you think of the Moody Blues. You know how these things work. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm really looking forward to the next one. I know at some point there's going to be an inevitable drop. I'm hoping it's not yet, because it's been a good ride. It's been a good ride so far. Fingers crossed this goes on for several albums more. So that's what I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do those things. And peace. Talk to you later.